Okay, hi. So as I'm still in Canada, I'm going to give you guys go through some examples with fractions, decimals, and percentages, and then you'll carry on working with percentages of amounts, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So you will have these questions in front of you. I'm going to do a couple examples with you, and then I'll give you the answers at the end, and you can check your work. Okay, you can always pause this if you need to look at something a little bit more closely, and you can always rewind it and look at it again, okay? So, what fraction of this shape is shaded? So, give your answer in its simplest form. So first we need to look at the fraction. So remember when we're talking about fractions, it's always the part over the whole. So if I look, I need to figure out how many boxes I have in total. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, that is my whole. So that goes on the bottom. Okay, so I've got 10 on the bottom. Alright, then I need to look at the top. So I need to look at how many boxes are actually shaded. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got 6 out of 10. Okay, now if I look at that answer, that's correct, but it's not fully done because it's asking us for its simplest form. So remember, to reduce fractions, I need to look for a number that I can divide the top and the bottom by. So if I look at that, easiest way to do that is to just divide by 2. Okay, so I'm going to divide the top by 2, and I'm going to divide the bottom by 2. Oh, excuse me. Okay, and my answer is going to be 3 over 5. Okay, so if I look at that, there's no number that I can divide 3 and 5 both by because they are both prime numbers. Okay, now for this one, it's asking us to find 7/10 of 50 pounds. Sorry. So I need to know what 1/10 is. That's the first thing. So I need to take 50 pounds and I need to split it up into 10 groups. And to do that, I need to use division. Okay, so I'm going to do 50 pounds divided by 10. Okay. And that's going to give me 5 pounds. So each one of those groups is going to be 5 pounds. Now, if I have 7 of those groups, I have 2 different ways I can do that. I can either use repeated addition or I can use multiplication. So if I use multiplication, I'm going to do 7 times 5, which is going to give me 35 pounds. Okay, and that's going to be my final answer. Okay, the other way you could do it is if you look at this, there's 10 spots here. We know each one of those spots is 5 pounds. So if I do 5 for each one of those boxes and put it in 7 of those boxes, count those all up, I'm going to end up with 35 pounds. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so 35 pounds. Okay, now for this one, I'm not going to go through this one with you. But what I'd like you to do is find 10%. So remember 10%. Okay. If I'm converting that to a fraction, remember percentages are always out of 100. So if I have 10 out of 100 as my fraction, what's that going to be? If I simplify it, I'm going to divide the top by 10 and the bottom by 10, and I get 1 over 10. Okay, and then if I want to find 30%, okay, then I need to find 3 groups of 10%. Okay, or 3 out of 10. So we're going to do 200 we're going to divide it by 10. That's going to give us 20. And then when we multiply 3 of those groups, we're going to get an answer of 60. Okay, oops. Also, it's really hard to write on a computer. So, 60 meters. All right. Now, when I add fractions, what I want to do is just, once my denominator is the same, remember the denominators are bottom number, So if that bottom number is the same, all we're going to do is we're going to add our numerators. Okay, so remember your numerators are your top numbers. So 3 plus 1 gives us 4. Bottom number stays the same because we're still dealing with 8 slices. Okay, so 8 slices in every hole. And if I simplify that, I'm going to divide the top by 4 and the bottom by 4, and I get 1/2. The other way you could do that is you could divide by 2 and get 2 over 4, and then divide by 2 again and get 1 over 2. Okay, so there's page 1 done. Now, with the equivalent fractions, what I'd like you to do is you're going to look for what do I have to multiply the bottom number by to get to the other number. Okay, so I need to know what do I multiply 5 by to get to 15. Okay, so obviously I'm going to multiply that by 3. So if I do that to the bottom, then I have to do the same thing to the top. So you're going to fill in the answers at the top. Okay, you're going to do the same thing with these ones. Now I want you to pause this. I'm trusting you guys to really do this properly. You're going to pause the video. You're going to do those questions, and then I want you to check your answers with me when you are done, okay? So for this one, when I multiply by 3, I get 9. For this one, 2 times 2 gives me 4. And then to find out, I need to think, what do I multiply by 2 to get 14? And that's going to be 7. Other way I can think about that is 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. Okay, and for this one, I have to multiply by 4. Okay, so times 4 gives me 24. 11 times 4 gives me 44. All right. Now, to find 10% of £6.50, you are going to divide that by 10. So you need to do £6.50 divided by 10. Okay, and you're going to pause the video again. Okay, and then I want you to do your work in your book. When you do that, remember, so going through the answer now, when I divide by 10, okay, I can move my digits to the right, and to divide by 10, I want to move them one place value over. So my 6 is going to move over to the 10th place, which means I have 0.65, so 65 pence. Okay, for this one, okay, anytime we're finding a fraction of a value, you want to divide by the denominator. So find out what one group is going to be. So for 200, I want to find out what 1/4 is going to be. Okay, so I'm going to do 200 divided by 4. That's going to give me 50. So that means that each one of these boxes is worth 50. Okay, and then I need to think about how many of those boxes do I need. Okay, so if I need 3/4, I'm going to need 3 of those boxes. So then I've got 50, 100, 150. So my answer here is going to be 150. Okay, 1/2 is a percentage. So when we write fractions as percentages, we want to take our denominator, our bottom number, and we want to turn it into 100. Okay, so I need to think about what do I have to multiply 2 by to get to 100? Okay, and that's going to be times 50. Okay, and the other way I can do that, if I can't just figure it out, I can do 100 divided by 2. Okay, and then whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So my percentage is going to be 50 over 100. Okay, so my percentage is going to be 50%. Remember that percentage sign just means out of 100. Okay? Okay, so that gives us our percentage. Now for this one, I want you to try this one on your own. Remember that percentage sign means out of 100. So when I write my fraction, I've got 25 as my numerator. I want you to pause the video, go through and write your denominator, and then simplify your fraction. Make sure you put it in your simplest form, and then you can go ahead and restart it. Okay? Alright, I'm assuming that you've done that properly and you're not cheating. Okay, so remember our denominator, because we've got a percentage, is going to be 100. Okay, when I look at that, I can divide both the top and the bottom by either 5 or 25. Okay, I'm going to do it with 5 so that I can show you the repeat division. So if I divide 25 by 5, I get 5. 100 by 5, I get 20. Okay, and I can divide by 5 one more time, and I'm going to get 1 over 4. And that's going to be my simplified fraction. Okay? Good. We're doing well here. Now, circle each number that is less than 1/2. So we need to think about 1/2 and what that looks like in both a decimal, a percentage, and a fraction. Okay, so I'm going to start with my fraction. So I know 1/2 is 1 out of 2. Okay? Now, as a percentage, I need to think about what's half of 100. So when I do 100 divided by 2, I get 50%. Okay? And that can actually help us write our decimal as well, because if I think about decimals, remember our decimal place values are tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So if I think about the hundredths, I know that this fraction is going to be 50 out of 100, or 5 out of 10. So I'm going to write my decimal as 0.5. Okay, and those are just kind of the ones that we need to know. Okay, so those are ones that you're kind of expected to know and just kind of memorize. So we're looking for numbers that are less than 1/2. So if I look at this, 0.21, that's going to be less than 0.5, so that's good. 52%, that's more than 1/2. 1/3, okay, if I think about 1/3, okay, if I was looking for equivalent fractions, okay, I can multiply 2 times 3 and I can turn both of those into sixths. Sixths, difficult one. So 1/2 is going to be 3 out of 6. Okay, and 1/3 is going to be 2 out of 6. So 2 out of 6 is less than 3 out of 6, so that means that that is one that I can circle. 0.78, that is more than 0.5, so I'm not doing that one. 3 out of 4, well, if I'm looking for fourths from 1/2, I need to multiply by 2. That means I've got 2 out of 4, so 3 out of 4 is more, so that's no good. And 35% is going to be less than 50%, so that's another one I'm going to circle. All right, good. Now, equivalent. Equivalent is just a fancy way to say equals to. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to change 1/3 into these different denominators. Okay, so to go from 1/3 to sixths, I need to multiply by 2. Okay, so when I multiply the top by 2, I'm going to get 2 sixths. That means that this is going to be equal. Okay, so this one, twelfths. To go from 3 to 12, I need to multiply by 4. 1 times 4 is going to be 4, so my equivalent fraction would be 4 out of 12, not 5 out of 12, so that one's not. Okay, let's look at this one. How do I go from 3 to 18 using multiplication? I need to multiply by 6. Okay, that means my top number is going to be 6. All right, so that is equivalent or equal to. And for this one, to go from 3 to 30, we'll check this one anyway. Okay, so for 3 to 30, I need to multiply by 10. 1 times 10 does not give me 11, so that's not correct. And we know that we need 2 fractions, so we're right there. All right, 70% as a decimal. Let's start by writing out our fraction. So I know I'm going to have 70 out of 100. Okay, and I want you to really think about those place values. Okay, so if you're struggling with your place values, in the cupboard at the very top shelf, in that box, the red box that's got all my little manipulatives and things, there is a place value chart, one that's got all your tenths, your hundredths, your thousandths for when we did place value. So if I think about those, okay, I've got my tenths here, okay, and that's out of 10. Okay, I've got my hundredths here, and that's going to be out of 100. All right, and I've got my thousandths as my last one, okay, and that's going to be out of 1,000. So if I'm thinking about